So you finally learn how to create a high converting webinar from scratch. You applied that knowledge, you took action, you spent days or even weeks creating that webinar. You're super excited and you launch it to the public. In terms of results, you're amazed. You start imagining all these customers that you're going to reach, all the profits that you're going to make because you have hundreds of people signed up on your webinar. But on the day of that webinar, you only get 10, 20 people signed up. What? Yeah. I know it's depressing, and you're probably thinking, what in the world happened to the rest of the 100 people that signed up? Where did they go? Why didn't they sign up? Why didn't they attend? The truth is this. It's a known fact that the majority of people will not attend your webinar, even though that they sign up for it. But there is a way to increase that number, which we'll talk about in this video series. On top of that, you're going to discover why your existing webinar isn't producing the sales conversions that you want. You'll also learn how to take it to the next level and skyrocket your sales conversions and get as many people to your webinar as you can. So just a quick videos overview here. We got video number 1, which is the introduction to webinar conversions. So obviously in this case, you need to have a webinar or have a webinar planned in your mind, because this video course is going to be focusing on increasing the conversions of your webinar. So in the introduction, we'll talk about the tools that you're going to need, quick overview of the video course, and in video number 2, we'll talk about the biggest mistakes that most webinar hosts make that lose sales. So obviously you don't want to make these same mistakes. Video number 3, we're going to talk about how to increase your actual attendee rate. So like I said earlier, you might have 100 or 200 people sign up. Only 20 people might actually show up for the actual webinar. Now, while that is the case across the board, there are ways to actually increase the number of attendees. Video number 4, we're going to talk about webinar email schedule. I'm going to give you a layout of a recommended schedule, what you do on the first day, what you do on another day, and what you do right before the webinar. So I'm going to give you a time-tested schedule, so you don't really have to think. Video number 5, we're going to talk about email follow-up and reminder templates. So up until the webinar, you obviously need to follow up with your sign-ups, and you want to do it in such a way that it will attract them to actually attend your webinar. So I'm going to show you actual templates. You can swipe it. We'll give you swipe files. You can use it on your own. You can customize it so that you can get up and running fast. Video number 6, we're going to talk about getting people to run through your door. In terms of, okay, once you have the webinar done, how do you get more sales? And then how do you get more sales after the webinar? Video number 7, we're going to give you some after the webinar follow-up templates. So it's similar to video number 5, but it's video number 5 is before the webinar. Video number 7 is after the webinar, and I'm going to show you some actual templates and swipe files that you can use and that you can customize for your own webinar follow-up system. So with that said, with this video course, you can start discovering how to take your existing webinar to the next level and skyrocket your sales. Hello and welcome to video number 1. This is the introduction to webinar conversions. Why is this crucial? Why are we focusing so much on the email aspect, the before email and the after the webinar aspect in terms of emails? Well, if you really start thinking about how we act ourselves, a lot of times what happens is we all have signed up for many things, many webinars, and if you've attended those webinars 100%, congratulations for you. But I can guarantee you that the majority of you, including me, have all signed up for webinars or have all signed up for meetings or events or things like that, and then something has gotten in the way and we just forgot about it. So that's what's happening with your webinar's attendees. People's lives are busy and they forget. And not always do they intentionally do that. So by realizing that truth and realizing that everybody is similar in that light, that there's busy, their family needs them, their kids need them, their pets need them, or something happens unexpectedly that they just totally forget. So if that's the case, how can you help them? Remind them, follow up with them. The solution is you kind of have to give people a reason to show up. So we're going to cover that. But you also need to nudge them along the way up until the webinar, and the same with after the webinar. And I really want you to think and really want you to get into the mindset here, because a lot of times we think, oh, I'm going to bother so-and-so because I have to follow up with them. Yeah, that's the case with some people. But the way that I see it is that it's okay to follow up with somebody as long as it relates to what people signed up for. So if somebody signed up for your webinar, then they're probably not going to get annoyed as much when you try to remind them, because you're doing them a favor. A lot of times they want to initially, but then they totally forget about it. And then a lot of mistakes that a lot of webinar hosts make is that they don't do the follow-ups, they don't do the reminders, and then what ends up happening is people just totally forget. So like I said, while you might annoy some people, the majority of people will appreciate the reminders. And what I found is by following up, you actually increase your conversions because people get excited about it and they're more likely to attend. Now, here's some recommended tools. Obviously, with this video course, you're really not going to need any tools. All you need is pen and paper or something to write the template and swipe files down and the ideas and the strategies down. You can use your iPad, your iPhone, or your computer, whatever best suits you. Now, keep in mind that I'm not really going to show you how to set it up on an autoresponder and stuff like that, but things that you're going to need later on to help you set up these live webinar funnels or even automated replay funnels is you're going to need autoresponders like GetResponse or Aweber so that you can build your list and then you can follow up with them. And then you can also follow up with them after the webinar. You can use recommended softwares like OneMinuteSites.com or even LeadPages.net, which is optional. I know 1 Minute Sites. I don't know about Lead Pages, but I know about 1 Minute Sites that it allows you to integrate it with GoToWebinar. So you could have GoToWebinar doing all the follow-ups, but if you know, and if you're aware of this, GoToWebinar doesn't really have a feature that allows you to, after the webinar, follow up after the webinar. So you have to do that with either GetResponse or Aweber or 1 Minute Sites or Lead Pages. One software tool that I personally have been testing out is called Webinar Ignition. It's basically a WordPress plugin that integrates with your WordPress site and it sets everything up. In fact, in my opinion, it makes life so much easier in terms of automating your webinars. And it works really well with email and it works with text messaging. So it takes it one step further and texts people if they enter their information, their phone number. Then, as you know, somebody getting a text is they're more likely to take action because people carry their cell phones everywhere. Not everybody carries their computer everywhere. And not everybody checks their email every time. But when a text message comes in, they generally check it. So that's really powerful. And I personally tested the software out. And I would definitely recommend you take a look at it. So with that said, let's move on to video number 2. Hello and welcome to video number 2. We're going to talk about the biggest mistakes that webinar hosts make that lose sales. So what kind of mistakes do we make that prevents us from making the sale? Well, first of all, we tell people too much before the webinar happens. And what I mean by that is you might give too much information about what is on the webinar. You might give a little bit to build curiosity, and you might want to give just a little bit like benefit points, what's going to happen, kind of a general idea that's interesting but incomplete. You don't want to give too much information. So if you were to give a PDF or you were to give a checklist to somebody or some sort of homework to do that's really intriguing, make sure that you do not give too much. You give maybe a checklist or something that is interesting but incomplete. No social proof, no case studies. What you want to do is you want to get them to think, well, if they can do it, so can I. Because if they don't have that in their brains, then there's probably not really a reason for them to sign up. Or if you can do it, so can I. So these are just some things that will help boost your conversion rate. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you don't have social proof, that you will not make as many sales. What that means is this definitely just boosts your conversion rates. And of course, no reminder or follow-ups to the webinar. So we talked a lot about this, and in fact, this whole video course is focused on reminder emails and follow-up emails. And the reason being is because people live those busy lives and they need a reason, they need to be follow-up to get them to attend the webinar. Now let's talk about some mistakes that we often make during the webinar. A lot of times we talk too much about ourselves and we don't angle what we talk about ourselves in relating to the audience and what the audience wants. So it's okay to talk about yourself as long as the audience understands why you're talking about yourselves. Maybe their goal is to ultimately become like you, or their goal is to ultimately use what you have produced and get the same results. So as long as you angle it that way, it's okay to talk about yourself. But I've seen many times, time over and time over again, people just talking about themselves and it doesn't relate to the topic in the webinar. No engagement with the audience, talks only with self or interviewee. You've been on webinars where the person just talks to the interviewer or interviewee back and forth. It's really interesting, it's really amazing, but if you think about the webinars that really intrigued you and really got you laughing, you giggling, taking action, and really excited, they're probably the webinars that engaged with you, meaning the interviewer and the host said, okay, so our audience wants to know this, our audience, or if you think this, say yes or one or two, and then the audience responds. So there has to be some sort of engagement during the webinar itself so that you keep people's eyes open, and your conversion rates will definitely go a lot higher by doing that. No pitch, no call to action, and no nothing. A lot of people are scared to pitch or call to action. Don't be afraid to ask for the sale. And make sure that you're confident in asking. So with that said, as you can see, it's not rocket science at all. You can easily implement this stuff right away. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about actual strategies that you can use in increasing your webinar conversions.